Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the App Service Community Stand-Up. I'm your host, Byron Tardif, and as always, Denver producer. And this month we have Jordan, and we're going to be talking all about zone redundancy on App Service. But first of all, thanks, Denver, for covering for me last month when I was out. If you guys want to go check out, we have a very in-depth episode about Java and all of the things that you can do with Java that Denver was the one that was driving. So thanks a lot for that. And then just one more cleaning house item. We're going to be out the month of January, so we're going to be in hiatus for January, but we're going to be back with more App Service community stand-ups on February and through the rest of next year. Okay, so with that out of the house, Jordan, thanks a lot for coming back on the show. And this time we're going to talk about zone redundancy. So zone redundancy, what is it? Why should I care about it? Like, what's the magic here?
All right, no, thanks for having me. Today we're going to talk about zone redundancy. I guess the first thing we want to go over is what is a region and what is a zone. So those are very important concepts for understanding zone redundancy when it comes to your infrastructure. The first thing you want to know is what a region is. So across the world, there's a number, I can't even remember the number of Azure regions at this point, but every couple months a new region pops up and customers are allowed to deploy their resources there. So regions are essentially just geographic areas in the world. Inside
so that's when I see like West US or Canada Central or North Europe. Yeah,
exactly. It won't be like a specific country. It'll be like an area that makes up a bunch of countries or something like that. So within each of those regions, you have zones. A zone is essentially a data center in a specific location in that region. And we typically have multiple zones within each region that are logically isolated from each other, which means that if for some reason one of the data centers or zones is hit with a natural disaster or something, your applications, your workloads, infrastructure will likely still be up and running if you just so happen to be running in those other zones, or if you're running in a zone redundant manner across multiple zones in that region.
Okay, so when I'm choosing a region in the portal and I say, hey, I'm going to have my web app is going to be running in West US, and if I have one instance, then I'm only going to be in one zone, right? So I need to have more than one instance to potentially span zones. And
exactly.
In theory, what's happening here is, let's say that I do 3 instances, then each instance could potentially be in a different data center that is within that geography, but not necessarily in the same building.
Correct. And if you're concerned about latency or anything related to application issues because it's spread across multiple zones, that's not something you have to worry about. That's something the platform handles. And running in a zone redundant manner versus what we call like regional, which is in a single zone, I guess, you're not going to notice a difference in terms of performance.
Awesome. So this is a feature that exists today that I can use with App Service. So what's new? What's changing?
So we have a number of new features that we're going to be announcing, or we're going to be releasing at some point early next year. We're pending some deployments, so stay on the lookout for announcements when those go out. But if you caught our blog post, which came out with Ignite a couple weeks ago, we announced some new features that I just want to go over today again, and also go into a little bit more depth so you get a better understanding of what we're releasing and how it can improve your applications. So the first thing we want to announce is the support for 2-zone AZs. Previously, if you wanted to deploy your web app zone redundantly, you needed 3 zones. And that means, if you selected the West US region, if one of the zones in that region was unhealthy for one reason or another, we would block deployments to that region and you would not be allowed to deploy zone redundantly. So with this 2-zone AZ support, we are now creating 2-zone scale units or stamps, which is where your infrastructure is deployed. So you will actually be able to deploy your web apps in these regions that were previously locked down or blocked because of a number of reasons, behind the scenes that we don't explicitly tell you about. So that's a big announcement. It'll give more customers the ability to use zone redundancy. And along with this, we are lowering the min instance requirement from 3 instances to 2 instances. So this is a big deal because previously, if you wanted to use zone redundancy, you needed 3 instances, which means you had to pay for 3 instances. As many people know, our instances can be quite expensive. So bringing that down to 2 automatically lowers your cost by a third, and it still gives you that same 99.99% SLA that you get with, the 3 zone offering. I'll pause there for any questions or feedback.
Yeah, no, that's a big deal. If you have 1 instance, I think the SLA is 99.95. So if you want to go to that 4 nines of availability, you do need at least 2 instances and be in that zone redundant zone. So it lowers the price and it lowers the complexity of the deployment to only require 2 zones.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So hopefully this will allow more customers that previously were hesitant to enable zone redundancy because of the cost. So this will allow you to get that resiliency while only increasing your cost ever so slightly.
So then if I'm an existing app service customer that I'm already using zone redundancy, can I then go change it to be 2 zone or 3 zone?
Yeah, so this is another great part of this new feature. If you already have zone redundancy enabled, you'll automatically inherit this 2 zone capability because you'll already be on a scale unit that supports 3 zones. So you'll be able to scale down to 2 instances if you don't actually need 3 instances. Just one thing to note is we are not giving anyone the ability to select the number of zones that you get. So either you land on a part of our scale on a stamp that supports 3 zones, or if you're in a region that's constrained for some reason or another, you might land on a stamp that supports only 2 zones, and you'll only ever get to be in 2 zones. You can scale to as many instances as you want, but you'll only be in 2 zones. Eventually, we'll try to bring a 3rd zone in there when the region heals, and we can do that. That retrofitting process is an ongoing process that we're doing in the background. But that's just one thing to note.
Awesome. And I guess that leads to the next question. How do I know how many zones am I in, and what can I do with that information?
Yeah. So previously, if you enabled zone redundancy, you kind of just had to believe that it was enabled. We didn't tell you like which zones you were actually in. So with this new feature and with this new update, we're going to be giving you the physical zone that each instance is located in. So you'll be able to validate if you have any compliance requirements. You'll be able to validate that each of your instances is in 2, 3 zones. And this goes along. I'm going to skip the next bullet. We'll go to the last bullet on this slide. This goes along with Chaos Studio. So if you aren't familiar with that service that Azure has, it's a service that allows you to test zone outages for various services and offerings that are onboarded. App Service Environment v3, so our single tenant offering is being onboarded to that Chaos Studio early next year. And you'll be able to simulate zone outages. You'll be able to validate, which instances are going down. And this is something that a lot of our big customers request. So we're finally giving customers the opportunity to do this.
Awesome. Well, this is all great news. I just want to remind people that if you're watching this live, we're taking questions. So just throw your questions in the comments. Happy to answer them. And then I guess my next question is, so right now, if I had to make the decision of making my app service plan zone redundant when I was creating it, is that going to change so that if I have existing app service plans and I don't want to go and redeploy and rebuild all the infrastructure, can I now make those old app service plans zone redundant?
Yeah, so that's probably the biggest feature we're releasing with these announcements. The zone redundant property for both our multi-tenant offering and App Service Environment v3 is now going to be mutable at any point during the life of the app service plan. Previously, as you said, this could only be done at the point of creation of your app service plans. So if you ever wanted down the line to make your app zone redundant, you had to redeploy. And for a lot of customers, that's a lengthy process. Now, toggle the feature on off whenever you want. If you have a critical period, that you need to ensure you have a resilient application, turn it on, increase the number of instances you have if you need to, turn it on, and then turn it off when you want to scale down to less than 2 instances, and you have that flexibility now.
Right. So yeah, this goes kind of like hand in hand with the season, right? So right now, for example, if you're in retail, you probably want to make sure that your app is really, really always there and scaled out and serving. So during your busy periods, you would go into this configuration where you're scaled out, you're in multiple zones, etc. But then, when things quiet down, I don't know, maybe January, February, when nobody's buying stuff, then you can probably bring it down and not be paying for those added instances that you don't need.
Yeah,
Awesome.
one other thing to note is, like, if you have 2 instances already, you might as well just turn this on, because there's no additional cost for enabling it, and you're going to get that additional resiliency without any additional fee. So unless you have a very specific reason for needing to be in a single zone, which is not something we even guarantee if you disable the zone redundant property, just turn it on. It's a great thing to have on.
Awesome. And then do you have what the UI is going to look like? And how am I going to be able to do all of these things?
Let me just go to the next slide. So this is a preview of what the Azure portal is going to look like in a couple months when these features are released. I'll zoom in quickly here. So the first thing we want to show you is just the toggle to enable and disable zone redundancy. So it's basically just going to be a checkbox, and that's it. The other thing to note is this maximum available zones property that we're going to be showing you. And this will tell you whether or not your app service plan is on part of the app service footprint that supports zone redundancy. So this will be either 3 if you're on a scale unit that supports 3 zones, 2 if it only supports 2, or 1 if it's 1, you will not be able to enable zone redundancy, because obviously you're not on our zone redundant footprint. For the majority of customers who are in regions that support zones, you should be able to, you will have a number that's either 2 or 3 for this maximum available zones, and you will be able to toggle zone redundancy as needed. Unfortunately, if you're currently on that footprint, then you have to redeploy.
Right. Awesome. And then just because we're in the same UI, I'm assuming that all of this plays nicely with the automated scaling features that we have, right?
Yeah, so we're not changing any of those scaling features, but they're all here. They're all still available for you. Changing instance counts is still very simple slider. And then, as I mentioned before, you're going to get that visibility into the physical zone of each of your instances. So the portal is going to now list the instances that your application is using, and then it will also list the physical zone. So more details that a lot of customers have been requesting, and we're finally giving you visibility into that.
Yeah, I think right now the only way to get that physical zone is calling support and asking for it. So it's good that it's there and you can actually see it.
Definitely.
So is there any other difference between the single tenant ACEs and the multi-tenant app service plans that we should know about?
Yeah, so a lot of the announcements I made today apply to both our multi-tenant offering as well as our single tenant offering app service environment v3. So if you're already on one of those offerings, you probably already made the decision to go with one or the other for specific reasons. For example, if you chose app service environment v3, it's probably because you have some sort of compliance requirement that requires you to have single tenant isolation. If you don't have that requirement and you were just going to app service environment because there were some features there that were not on our multi-tenant offering, specifically simplified networking control. With app service environment, everything is in a single subnet, so your networking controls are limited to just that subnet, and there's not really anything you need to do to configure at the application level, which a lot of large enterprise like, because it just simplifies overall management. We've now brought a new feature to multi-tenant. It was announced a couple months ago, called multi-plan subnet join. So if you're familiar with our virtual network integration feature for the multi-tenant offering, previously you needed a single subnet for each VNet integration. So each app service plan required its own subnet. This can become tricky when you have a lot of app service plans, especially if you have very large apps.
Right.
So multi-plan subnet join allows you to essentially integrate an infinite number of app service plans in a single subnet. You're just limited by the number of IPs. So just be aware of that, and also be aware of when scaling and during upgrades, we double the number of IPs. So just also be aware of that. But this makes networking control over your multi-tenant apps so much simpler, and it will hopefully bring a lot of customers away from app service environment. Not that we want customers to move away from that, but it just makes things easier for customers, because app service environments come with a lot of additional configuration and knowledge that you have to have, additional support requirements. So if we can get you to multi-tenant, it's cheaper, it's easier to use, scaling is faster. You're getting essentially the same level of security and control other than that single tenant isolation at this point.
Right. So yeah, so this is huge, right? Because before I had to do a bunch of CIDR math to come up with like the right masks for the right, because every app service plan needed some subnet. I needed to make sure that I knew how big that app service plan was going to scale. I needed to have the right CIDR stuff, and then when I added another one, I needed to make sure that I wasn't going to run out of IP address, because it had to be its own. Because now what I could do is I could literally just do a 10 dot and use that same subnet for all of my app service plans, and not worry about whether I have enough IP addresses or not. Because if I exhaust the 10 dot, you're probably
yeah. And then you have one NSG, one route table for that subnet, and you're done. You don't have to worry about controlling any number of those across all the different subnets.
Or even like replicating it to make sure that you have the same thing on all of them.
Exactly. So this is a highly requested feature. It's now GA. We've already seen a good number of customers adopting it, and we're excited for more customers to start using it and giving us feedback for how it could be made even better.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Jordan. This is some very exciting stuff to go use right now, the VNet stuff, and to look forward in the next couple of months with the availability zones. Anything else you want to give us before we wrap up, or call it a day?
Yeah, I think we're good here. Check out the Ignite blog post. We will provide a link for that as well. Byron, I'm sure you'll share that out with your materials. Check that out for a bunch of announcements across app service. Other than that, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jordan. And then, yeah, next month we're going to be out, so no episode in January, but we're back in February. We're still looking at what we're going to be talking about, but just I want to throw a teaser there. We're probably going to be talking about SSH and some of the things that we're working for in that space. And then yeah, we're going to put a blog post with the links, etc. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Have a good one.